But I think it's vital, because intimacy is where the meaning lives. Intimacy is where people feel not just that it's relevant to their lives, but that it somehow is part of the fabric of their lives. There's an iconic photo for you. Earthrise, taken by Apollo 8. Many of us will recognize that because of the way it was shared, because of the way it's persisted in the culture, because at the moment we saw that blurry photograph, if we were watching television on that night, if we're old enough to remember that, the astronauts were speaking to us on that Christmas Eve. Well, I lost my way. I sure did. The listserv, people started complaining their email boxes were filling up. I still loved it, but somewhere in the, I guess, 97 range or so, I switched. I went to Blackboard. Why did I do that? I'll talk about that in a moment. This is what resulted. I've blocked out the students' names here, but you can see that's what the listserv looked like when I got to Blackboard. In my naivete, I thought it would be the same. It was not, by any means. And I can see that now very clearly, but I couldn't see it at the time. Because at the time I thought, this is just about communication. I wasn't thinking observability. I wasn't thinking about persistence. I wasn't thinking about addressivity. I just thought, these are messages being exchanged. I was wrong. This was an active forum. It was an introduction to film studies forum. And so people are talking about Citizen Kane, they're talking about Rosebud, they're talking about the various characters in Citizen Kane. And there was some good stuff there, but it wasn't great. It didn't feel the same way. And if you look at it, what do you see? Re. Is re a marker of addressivity? Only in the crudest possible way. Any intimacy there? No, not really. I tried. I had the Ilse Lund Laszlo group. I split people into groups. I tried everything I could do to restore that feeling of purpose, that feeling of discovery that I had in the listserv. And it all worked a little bit, but it didn't work real well. And it took me 2 or 3 years to kind of figure out why I was dissatisfied. Well, the other question is, why did I switch? I didn't really want to go with a learning management system. I didn't really want to go to a discussion forum, but I did, for some reasons that are obvious to me now, in retrospect. When the system was described to me, it was a familiar paradigm, if you're thinking of communication very narrowly. It was very easy for me to understand what it was that this thing was supposed to be. It was obvious. The listserv was a little stranger. So what do you do in your classes, Dr. Campbell? Your students email each other? What is that like? Why do you do that? What happened? And so forth, right? Turns out that the more oblique, intimate form of communication was better, but I couldn't see it when I switched. It was a familiar paradigm. The uses were obvious. I switched because a fellow professor, a colleague, said, "This is something new. I think we should try it." And I said, "Okay." She told me, "You're really interested in online communication. I think this would be good for you to figure out." I said, "Okay." I wasn't thoughtful enough about it, and she thought it was really interesting. For the time, it probably was really interesting. This same person is now creating online, via a blog publishing platform, the largest collection of free audio of 18th century works in the world. She and her students are putting this together. So she got on Blackboard eventually, too. But at the time, well, you know how this goes. It's what we're all going to do now, right? And I was still in this idea that, okay, the next shrink-wrapped piece of software has landed on my desk. I need to install it. All right, so I installed Blackboard in myself. And what was the other thing that got me to do it? I love this pathology of intensification. I love that as a phrase, as an idea. It's from a book called Why Things Bite Back, Technology and the Revenge of Unintended Consequences by Edward Tenner. And it's a fallacy that says if a few things working together are good, a lot of really big things in a tight system will be better. If you invent a technology that takes you this far, in a kind of a ramshackle way, make it all bigger. Make it the all singing, all dancing, everything box. And that will solve all of your problems. Wrong. Tenner in his book talks about how this makes for more serious sports injuries, more chronic health problems, repeated stress disorders in computerized offices, and so forth. The idea is not always, gee, if you have one furnace and that cuts your heating bill in half, buy two and it'll be free. No, that doesn't work. But it looked like this at the time, right? Blackboard. It was going to be easier to manage. I didn't have to collect students' email addresses. I didn't have to go visit my buddy in the computer science department. I didn't have to do any of that. Automatic population, you know how it goes. Automatic population, single sign-on. Whoa. Single sign-on, the holy grail of our existence. Only one password to be hijacked. Only one identity to be stolen. Whoops. Okay, maybe not then, huh? It had high integration. Why do a listserv over here and put your syllabus online over here? Why do all that stuff? Go to Blackboard. It'll all be there. Your syllabus will be there. Your discussion, nothing will look like very much. Nothing will be intimate. Nothing will be meaningful, but it'll all be together. It'll all be integrated. Frankly, I have to admit to you, there were issues of control. I knew that it would be a lot easier to stop a flame war in Blackboard. I could block a user. Getting that user off the listserv would have taken a visit to my buddy over in the computer science department, and so forth. It would have been messier. It would be a lot easier to control the output of my own information. It would be a lot more like the kinds of exchanges we had in the classroom, where I would hand things out. Now, if the students lost the syllabus, I could just scold them and point them to a website. And in Tenner's book, he talks about using their own kinds of metrics. He talks about how in the Soviet Union, the metrics for productivity had to do with weight and size. So one of the ways the Soviets knew that they were being more productive is that the carriage on the typewriter was actually bigger than the piece of paper, because that bigger was better. And there's an apocryphal story that the Soviets actually bragged that they, before anybody in the West, would invent the world's largest microchip. That may be apocryphal, but it's a great story. In some ways, Blackboard was the world's largest microchip. Oops. So why didn't I stay? All my colleagues did. I got tired of observability being irrelevant. There was just nothing to look at. You could have a Scotch plaid button. You could have a dark blue button. I think there are probably 5 or 6 other varieties of buttons you could have. I think I kind of ran out of the customization features, at least in what we were using. Maybe there are more in version 8 or 9 coming up. I don't know. But there was nothing to look at. Why would you want to see it? Also, it turned out to be kind of difficult to combine sections. It turned out to be difficult to arrange for certain kinds of observability. And because of what we all know are the issues with privacy and FERPA and all the rest of that, Blackboard helpfully made it harder to have guests come into courses. There was not much granular control of permission. So when my colleague Steve Greenlaw wanted to have a shared forum with some economists at a different site, it took getting in and doing some surgery on Blackboard to actually permit that, so that the students could learn together. Shocking, I know. Who cares about persistence when it's re? Not only that, there's no syndication. I couldn't get the stuff out. I couldn't pull stuff in. The students couldn't pull stuff in. And again, maybe this is changing, and I understand there's a pretty good learning management system that SUNY has adopted, which I am not familiar with, Angel. So there may be some great things in store or already there for you. But back in this day, no. There had to be special kind of hacking code written to be able to import an RSS feed into Blackboard. And that was, well, I don't know, you're going to break the server, I'm not sure. But there was nothing to do with it, right? It was an electronic version of the essay in a box, except it was actually a little bit worse